Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's lecture. Today's lecture is on what is the sole purpose of business? A fundamental question that we need to ask and we need to understand as we go forward with the fall term. So, what is the sole purpose of business? Interesting. I've asked this question in many classes and I've gotten quite a few responses. Most popular are to make money, to make a profit, to get rich, which might be even better. Something more philanthropic, service to community, or perhaps family, to provide for your family, or to take care of your employees in a close-knit community. All of this requires us to create a product, but creating a product isn't the sole purpose of business. But a product in our world is a good, a service, or an experience. And those three different products aren't mutually exclusive. One product can be all three. And so, for instance, I've been using the example of an iPhone, or actually I started out by using the example of an iPod, which if you remember back in the day, maybe some of you weren't alive yet, but 20, 25 years ago when they came out with the iPod, it was similar to a Sony Walkman, and a Sony Walkman you would load your music on, usually cassettes, but then with digital technology, the iPod came along and we were able to upload music onto it, plug in our earbuds, right? They had a wire at that point and it was all white, and we would walk out of our house and walk through our lives listening to the soundtrack of our lives that we had uploaded onto our iPod. Well, the same is true of the iPhone, but it does much more. It's actually a phone, although most people don't use it as a phone anymore. They use it to text message from the majority of their communications. But in addition, it still has the ability to upload videos, to put your games on it, to put your music into it, and still use it as the central entertainment center for your entire life. And so most people have their phone close by, I'm sure you do right now, that 24 hours a day, it's become a center point in our lives. And it's one of the most spectacularly successful products in history because it checks so many boxes on what we do. But even creating a product like the iPhone isn't the sole purpose of business. So what is the sole purpose of business? So what we've come up with is that the sole purpose of business is to create a customer. Without a customer, you don't make revenue, you don't make a profit, and you don't get rich. So Peter Drucker, who was a management icon, his career was long. He wrote about 28 books, all of which are spectacular and have become basically the canon of the knowledge that we use in business. And so his concept of the sole purpose of business is very important, and it was to create a customer. And then once you have a customer, continuously innovate to keep that customer satisfied. So to create a customer and innovate, Peter Drucker. So how do you create a customer? It's not just, it's not a basic question. It actually goes on down the whiteboards for a little bit, but at the end, we will understand it. So for instance, how do you go from a startup business to an actual business? So from a business that's just spending money to a business that's making money. And so you find a need and fill it. So I took, in my first marketing class, this is all the professor wrote on the board, was find a need and fill it. And so his point in doing that was to create a discussion similar to this, hopefully dialogue as we move forward, of what that means to find a need and fill it, and how important is it. And so better yet, this has evolved over time, and we've now come to agree that it's to satisfy needs, wants, and demands and create desire in the customer. So much more dynamic, much more splashy, kind of interesting to think about. And marketing, as you well know, we're exposed to 500 at a minimum to thousands of advertisements per day. So we get it over the radio, we get it over our phones, we get text messages about marketing, we get it on cable TV, we get it on network TV, we get it on streaming services now. So how does that work? So the intent is to create demand and loyalty beyond reason. So let's dig a little deeper. So a product is a solution to a customer problem. So what I just described, the problem is we need to be entertained, and more often. And so now we have these devices that we can carry around with us, which are both informational, they have a very practical purpose to them, but they're also entertainment. So the iPhone is the solution to that problem 24/7. So to create a need, you start with a problem. We can move forward to defining these. So I said they were needs, wants, demands, and desires. Satisfy those and you create a customer. So let's go through them individually. What is a need? It's a perceived absence or deficiency, something that we don't have. It's a problem that we need personally, that we need to have solved. What is a want? A specific solution to a need. So we have lots of choices in terms of needs, but maybe we have a specific solution to that need. So what do we demand? If we're demanding something, we have a singular concept of exactly what we want, and it's self-imposed, and it's a self-imposed solution. How about desire? Desire is even better. So a strong feeling of wanting to have something or wishing for something to happen. So sometimes when people ask me, well, can it be all four? And what's the difference between these things? So what I use is an example of a child needing a new pair of shoes. So a child needing a new pair of shoes. This child happens to be into sports, and so let's say, for instance, they play basketball, and let's say, for instance, LeBron James is their favorite player. So they need tennis shoes, but they want Nikes. And so that gets them there, and their need and their want, but what do they desire? They desire the dream fulfilled of being a professional basketball player. And so in that one example, and for you parents out there, you can imagine that if that's the concept that's in the consumer's mind, then how loudly do they demand that specific solution? You've seen it. I know you've seen it. So needs, wants, demands, and desires. A strong feeling or wanting to have something or wishing for something to happen. So let's take a deeper dive into needs. And for those of you that have taken psychology or perhaps sociology and more business, we're starting to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because these are universal needs. These are needs that are universal human needs that are global. All of the 8 billion inhabitants of Earth have these fundamental needs. And in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you start at the base and you climb the ladder as each one is fulfilled. So to go through them quickly, you start at the baseline, and your base needs are physiological. You need to satisfy your base needs for food and water. How long can you go without water? Maybe days. How long can you go without food? Maybe weeks. How long can you go without air? Maybe minutes. So as you can see, with that specificity, these are needs that have to be fulfilled often, quickly, and throughout your lives. So they're at the base. Once you satisfy food, water, and air, your physiological needs, you can move up to the next step, which is almost, but not quite equally important. And that is your safety needs. And so your safety, for instance, from cold, right? Are you able to provide heat in the winter and cool air in the summer, which is becoming more and more poignant in this modern world? So physiological and safety, once you have those, which are basic needs, then we go up to psychological needs, and we live in communities. And so as humans, we're pack animals, and so we need belongingness. So we need to spend time with others. We need close proximity. We need love. We need companionship. And so feeling and belonging to a tribe, for instance, is the way that Seth Godin speaks about it. And it can be a cultural tribe, but it can also be a sports team. So how many Seahawks fans are out there? If there were students in the classroom, I'm sure several would be wearing Seahawks gear in the class. So they belong, and they want people to know that they root for the home team. So belongingness is an essential need. And so that feeling, it gives you self-respect, and it leads to self-esteem. And so self-esteem is the next psychological need. And that is that as we go from individuals taking care of our basic needs, and we start to feel that we belong to a community, we start to kind of look at ourselves relative to other members in the community, and we start to get the hint of an aspiration, something that we want to achieve or want to be, and what our role in our community is. And so that speaks to self-esteem. Once we've established ourselves and succeeded, then we can move to the highest level of the pyramid, which is self-fulfillment needs. And it's characterized here as self-actualization or aspirational. All of you that are in these classes that we're teaching here at SPSCC are involved in education. Education is a luxury. Education is up here at the top. Not everybody of these 8 billion people get to participate. And so it's an aspirational self-actualization opportunity, and it fulfills your self-fulfillment needs. So knowing that everybody has needs knows that there are a lot of products. So you can look at each of these individual needs, and you can see that there are tons of products. If you start thinking, and we'll do an exercise on this, and I'll go deeper into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because you can find hundreds of products that fit into each of these categories, and many examples of products that satisfy multiples. And combining them. So if you start with the need as you're starting to think about businesses, either you're studying a business, an existing business, you're starting your own business, a great place to start and look for ideas is in the fundamental needs that apply to the largest market we have, which are the 8 billion people on Earth. Not that you could ever address that market unless you're one of the super corporations. For instance, the most recognized word, what do you think the most recognized word is throughout communities and throughout cultures across the entire planet is? And it's interesting that it's the word Coca-Cola or Coke. And so everybody knows that brand, and it's been so successful and permeated the environment to that point. So products fit into here, not that you'll come up with Coca-Cola, but something else perhaps. So as we now know what businesses are, and that our intent with starting a business is to create a customer first, many customers afterwards. Those of you in marketing that's the job. The job is to increase the total addressable market to as large as you can make it. For those of us looking at businesses, business is competitive. So, and your products need to compete against other alternatives and substitutes. So it's imperative that your products, your new startup ideas, that your company is always working on innovation, and they're working hard at becoming unique and differentiated. And that's the game. The game is to be as unique and differentiated as you can possibly be and still be sought after by your community of customers, so, or perceived as such. So a hint, branding. I mentioned the Seahawks, and I mentioned Nike and Apple. So those are some of the largest brands in the world, and they have huge international brand recognition and brand strength. That, for instance, when we go back to needs, wants, demands, and desires, some people only wear certain clothing or certain shoes or drive certain cars based on the brand. And so if you think about it, many of you probably live in a household that has always been associated with one brand of car. So for instance, let's say Subaru or Volvo or GM or a truck brand or something like that. And so it's part of our self-identity. And so it's a need for sure, and it's not even a want anymore, it's a demand in terms of our household focus on an individual brand of car. So when we did our profile cards, we talked about core competence. So another element of business is to stay in your lane, is to do whatever you're best at. And whatever you're best at is building on a core competence, something that you do better than any other company in the world, whether you're a startup or an entrenched super corporation. You should always be focused on maximizing your core competencies, and ideally, and create a competitive or strategic advantage through your uniqueness and your differentiation. And ideally, create blue ocean. So do you want to compete in an environment that is filled with competitors and is a bloody red ocean and everybody's fighting for the last bone and trying to make sure that they get the largest piece of pie that they can? In blue ocean strategy, what we try to do is differentiate our products so much and make them so unique that the competition becomes irrelevant. And people just buy our products because they're our products and they're presented with a certain branding. So just finishing up here, I finish with uncontested market space. So those of you studying economics will recognize that with a blue ocean strategy, you can create uncontested market space, which is a virtual monopoly and which is the equivalent of a home run. So next we move on to marketing. And I would make an argument and have made an argument that marketing would be a better description of business, because what are the 4 Ps in marketing? And we'll go through them right now. But what these 4 Ps in marketing describe are pretty much all of the elements of making a product and bringing a product to market. So a product is a solution to a problem in the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps are product, price, placement, and promotion. And I added on positioning because positioning is so important in the modern world. But if we start at the top, so products are goods, services, experiences, or all 3, and they're all focused on solving some problem we have. Then the price is important, so it can go anywhere from luxury pricing all the way down to commodity. So a luxury would be, for instance, a Jaguar or a Lamborghini or a Range Rover, and a commodity would be something like well, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus in terms of a car brand, but how about when we go to a supermarket and you have the store brand or the signature brand, and it's made by the same company that makes the branded product, but it's not under the branded product's name, and they just do their overruns. Not that it's any less in quality, it's identical to the brand, but it's not, it's branded to the store and not to the manufacturer. And often it's at a budget price. So commodities are things that we all use every day, staples. And so a bag of sugar with a store brand will be on the bottom shelf and the lowest costing. So that's about positioning. The most expensive products will be on the highest shelves generally. So product, price, luxury to commodity, promotion, you need to place your products. You could put them into a Albertsons or a Safeway, or you could put them in Trader Joe's or a convenience store, 7-Eleven, and the products are associated with the placement as well. And so buying products at a convenience store or a dollar store, you're not going to expect the luxury brands to be represented. And then all products need to be promoted, whether it's just by sitting on the shelf in view of the customer or millions of dollars of Super Bowl advertising. So this is the way that we look at marketing from a business perspective, but how many of us as consumers ever say to our family or friends, I'll see you guys later, I'm going to go buy some products? We never say that. So we need to take off the hat of the corporation and put on the hat of the consumer and come over to the 4 C's of marketing. And so the 4 C's of marketing are direct inverse to what the 4 Ps are. So the way a customer thinks about what we're trying to sell them isn't that it's a product, it's a solution to a problem. So I have a problem and I need a solution. So the corollary to a product is a customer solution. The corollary to a price is, hey, how much is this going to cost me? Right? And so you're doing this rapid cost benefit analysis with the supercomputer you have on your head, and you're weighing the cost and benefits, and you're saying, okay, well, let's think about the price. Is this whatever that I'm holding in my hands, is it that valuable to me that I'm willing to spend whatever the price point is on that product. So how many of you have ever gone into a store or gone to the mall and bought a bunch of stuff, and then you get home and you go, oh no, what have I done? And the next day you go and you return it all. So you did a cost benefit analysis, but then you had some self-doubt and what I'm describing as buyer's remorse, which is also known as cognitive dissonance, which means that you thought you needed it, you thought you wanted it, but as you had time to think about it, you realized that, hey, I can do without this, and boy, did it cost me a lot of money. So cost, not price. What's it going to cost us is the customer perspective. So how patient are we in the modern world? Not very. So the producers and manufacturers of products and services try to place them in places that are very convenient to us. And that's our primary, when do we want things? For us, often convenience is time. So we don't want to get into the car, drive all the way to the mall, find a parking space, find our store, fight traffic, do all of those things to get a product. With businesses like Amazon now, convenience can be your kitchen table in your robe, grab your smartphone and order a product and get it within 24 hours, which has made convenience even more of a priority. How quickly can I get it? And so I'd ask, how patient are we as consumers? Not very patient at all. So as you're coming up with businesses or studying others, you can use these elements to design products that are unique and differentiated and adhere to the needs, wants, demands, and desires, and provide these elements that are most important to the consumer. And the final of the 4 C's is communication. How many of us like to be sold something? Do we like, when we walk into a store, some of us like to be greeted by somebody and have somebody assist us with our shopping. Others of us like to just go in, be on our own, mind our own business, and find our own goods and services, right? And so communication is, we don't necessarily want the used car salesperson, and mostly for communication, we're expecting a confirmation email or text on what we purchased, probably online, and that gives us a tracking number and tells us when we can expect to receive it. So communication. So finally, and to just wrap up the sole purpose of business, the best products that we can possibly make are those that provide the best solution or solutions at the right price, at the right time, and in the right place. So think about gasoline. Where do we put gasoline stations? They're on every major exit, on each corner of the exit, usually in close proximity to food. And so it's instant gratification, which falls right in with the customer solution, the cost, although I cheated in my example, because do we have any choice how much we pay for gasoline? No. You remember when I mentioned oligopolies earlier? Gas stations are oligopolies. So it's somewhat of a fixed price. So we don't get any choice in terms of the price. So the price is dictated by the few players in the market. And that's the ideal type of a market for the business, but not necessarily for the community or for the world. And I mentioned that we can use some strategies over here, the blue ocean strategy, to elevate the value to the consumer, simplify the choice that they make, and provide them with a product that will be so unique and so differentiated that it satisfies their needs, wants, demands, and desires, and creates a virtual monopoly for us. And that's today's lecture. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.